Bore pawb. Good morning, everyone. It is 9:13. We have got a long agenda to get through this morning, so we're going to make a start. So welcome everybody to this morning's meeting of the full authority. Lisa, do we have any apologies, please?
We do. We have apologies from Paul Cunningham, John Brinmore Hughes, John Evan Jones and Rhonda Roberts.
Thank you very much. Is anybody aware of any other apologies? No. Very sadly, we're going to start this meeting by remembering the loss of the Deputy Fleet Manager, Rob Outram, who died suddenly a few weeks ago. On behalf of authority members, I have sent a card of condolence to his partner, Jasmine, but I wonder if we could begin by just having a moment's silence in memory of Rob. Thank you. Diolch. Diolch pawb. Thank you, everyone. I will be looking to attend the funeral on behalf of the authority, although obviously everybody else would be welcome to attend as well. Chief, I don't think we've had details of the funeral yet, have we?
No, we're liaising closely with his family, but there's no details yet of the funeral. We'll let everybody know as soon as we have any information.
Okay, thank you. So going on to the agenda, the next item is the declaration of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? I can't see any hands being raised, so I'll take that as a no. So we're going on to the next item, which is notice of urgent matters. I haven't received any notification of any urgent matters, so that's not applicable. So we go on to item number 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of January. So if we take those for accuracy to begin with, page 1. Councillor Carol Beard. Carol?
Chair, yeah, thank you, Chair. It's noted that I was absent from that meeting, but that's incorrect. I did attend. If that can be changed, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Certainly we'll amend that. Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And lastly, page 7. So we will obviously amend page 1 to show Carol's attendance. Can we have a proposer that we can now accept those amended minutes, please?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. And a seconder? Thank you, Avrin. Diolch yn fawr. So will you show that you accept the minutes as an accurate record? Diolch yn fawr. Those have been approved. So we go on to item number 5, which is matters arising. I can't see any specific matters arising from the last meeting. I think all the matters have been attended to, unless anybody can see something that they want to refer to. No, I can't see any hands being raised. So we'll go on to item 6, which is the chair's report. So you will have seen the written report of the activities and events that myself and the deputy chair have been attending over the last quarter. Just one item to note. You'll see that there's been a number of sort of meetings that we've had with the deputy minister with responsibility for fire and rescue services, Hannah Blythin, mainly to do with the cultural review that will be taking place. But I don't know if everybody's aware, following Vaughan Geffen's success has been elected as the new First Minister, there has been a reshuffle within the cabinet. And although Hannah Blythin is still the Minister for Social Partnership, responsibility for the fire and rescue services has been transferred to the new Cabinet Secretary for Local Government, Housing and Planning, Julie James. So going forward, Julie James is the minister that we will now be having contact with. Does anybody have any questions or comments regarding the chair's report? No, we'll, in that case, can somebody propose that we do just accept and note the report, please? Thank you again, Mark. Can we have a seconder? Diolch Arwen, will you show that that's been accepted? Diolch yn fawr. So we now go on to item number 7, which is the independent cultural review, and over to you, Chief. Diolch.
Diolch, Cyfeiriad. Yes, this follows on from the verbal updates that I provided to members on the 18th of March at both the executive panel meeting and the audit committee meeting. So I'm pleased to provide members with a written paper to update them as to our cultural journey and also progress towards commissioning an independent cultural review. I think I'm on record as saying culture is never static. It does change over time. However, it was recognised post the COVID period and with the appointment of a new Chief Fire Officer in 2021, there was an opportunity to shape the culture of the service to better reflect the world in which we now operate and to improve the services that we provide to the public of North Wales. I'm very pleased to say that the Fire Authority has supported my desire for change in the culture. And they did that by supporting the recommendations which were made in my situational assessment, which was presented to members in September 2021. Similarly, members endorsed the need for an independent cultural survey at that point in September, in order to just sort of get a baseline assessment of where we were. Again, I would never say that as an organisation that we had a poor culture, but what we did was we then created an action plan and looked to improve where we were, and that progress over that was checked, and after 24 months we had the same independent company come back in and check on the culture, and we reported back to members at the Members Cultural Seminar, which many of you attended in February this year. In the meantime, you're aware that on the 3rd of January, the Independent Cultural Review into South Wales Fire and Rescue Service was published. And in response to the findings, the then Minister responsible for Fire, Hannah Blythin, announced the removal of South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority and the appointment of 4 commissioners to undertake the functions of the Fire Authority, not only to implement the recommendations of the cultural review, but also the recommendations made by the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor in his thematic reviews. As the Chair has said, we have met with the Deputy Minister and her officials twice since then, on the 19th of February and the 9th of March, to discuss the progress that we've made around culture in North Wales Fire and Rescue Service. And I suppose it did help that the Minister was familiar with North Wales. She'd had the opportunity to meet employees, both formally and informally, and she recognised that both ourselves and Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service were in a different place to South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. Both services, both ourselves and Mid and West, put together a proposal to Minister to say we would like to have an independent assessment of what we've done so far, and to be able to check that we are on the right track and to make suggestions as to what we could do in the future. And this formed, which she accepted, and that formed the basis of the statement that she issued on the 11th of March. The terms of reference for this review has been based upon the bullet points in the Deputy Minister's statement, and the intention is to procure these services through a framework. Now, until the tenders are received for that work, I can't tell you how much it might cost, but it would be very prudent for us to put aside a reserve, not only to pay for the cost of the review, but any temporary posts that we might need to support that workload. I've deliberately not put a figure on, but would just ask for an agreement in principle at this point in time. As part of the proposed review, the experiences of all interested parties, including current and former staff, will be sought. The idea is that we will capture these observations in order to look for themes and improvements that we can make, rather than re-reviewing individual cases. And both Fire and Rescue Services have agreed with Welsh Government officials that we will limit that feedback over a set period of time to better reflect the current position that we are in. In addition to employees' expectations, we recognise that there is the additional risk of our reputation around this review, and it's so important that we maintain the trust of the public, or we cannot effectively do our community safety work because there will not be that trust and that interaction and that ability to go into people's homes. So that is another risk that I'd probably like to draw to your attention. And lastly, the final report, together with any identified areas for improvement, will be presented both to this Fire Authority and to the Welsh Government in the autumn. Happy to take any questions, and the recommendations are to note the contents of the paper and to approve in principle the creation of a reserve to fund this review. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions for the Chief, please? Councillor Mark Young.
Bodadar Giacomo, thank you, Chair. Yes, so obviously we want to get this right, and the terms of reference sound like it's going the right way, but I would like to understand the involvement of members. I think it's important that we are involved in some way. So any thoughts on that would be appreciated, Giacomo. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Young. I guess this paper forms the official notification to members, but through the process of the review, we will be able to release certain progress reports to you, and then formally report back at the meeting in the autumn, in October. And we can use also the audit committees and the executive panel for more informal briefing.
Giacomo, thank you.
Councillor Gareth Jones. Gareth,
Yeah, thank you. I must admit, I'm just really nervous about the potential cost of this because we don't really know what it's going to cost, especially as we seem to be pretty far down the road to actually changing the culture, in that we've identified it, we're aware of it, we've put action plans into place, we've had some independent surveys and things, and whatever the cost is going to be, it's going to be the councils that actually pay for it at the end, because the money's not going to come from anywhere else. So I was just wondering if are we likely to have a different reaction from Julie James once we know what the cost is, because it's going to come from her overall budget one way or another, isn't it? And as I said, I'm fairly new to this, but from what I've read and seen and what you've been saying now, we are already on the way to sorting this out, and we're not in the position of South Wales. And there's always the danger with getting consultants in, is that they follow the land and expand, i.e. they'll tell us we've got a problem and they'll say, surprise, surprise, give us more money and we can help you solve the problem. There's a danger that they will want to disturb us and make us uncomfortable so that they can actually get more work to actually sort the problem out. But that's just me being a bit cynical.
No, we are very conscious of that, and I think that's what formed the basis of our conversation with Hannah Blythen, that really the extent of the South Wales review was just not proportionate for the position that we're in. The Chair and I will have the opportunity to talk with the new minister at the next Social Partnership Forum, which is on the 8th of May. So we will try and use that opportunity because by then we might have some indication of what the tenders are coming back at. To discuss the size and the proportion of this review. But it has got to be realistic, because you're right, this is a cost that we are having to bear ourselves. There is no Welsh Government money for this review, and it is not probably a piece of work that we would have undertaken, having done 2 already independent reviews ourselves, so we know where we are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments and your question, Gareth. Very pertinent. And I would draw members' attention to, I think, a very important part of the contents of the report, where it says both fire and rescue services have agreed that such feedback will be limited to experiences within a set time frame, which is yet to be agreed. So what we're saying is we're not going to go back for years and years to sort of see what sort of complaints, concerns, members of staff may have. We're looking at sort of recent history and not going back, for a long time. Otherwise, it just gets too extensive and it isn't sort of perhaps current and relevant to what we're seeking to do. Councillor Gareth Sandilands, Gareth?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's about 2 things. It's about confidence and respect. We're going to have to give our residents confidence in the service once again, particularly after the recent media reports, and therefore we need independence. And respect, I think we need to work with the Fire Brigades Union a lot more and have a mutual relationship there. So I'd be interested to know further details of how the Fire Brigades Union are going to be hand in hand going through with this culture review with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. And yes, fully agree that we need to work with the Fire Brigades Union. I don't know if members are aware that since we had the last full authority meeting, both the chair and the secretary have stepped down. So we are awaiting sort of ratification of the formal appointments process for a new chair and new secretary to be appointed, so that we can begin sort of to work with the new appointees. So that's just for information, but certainly we will be looking to do that going forward. Mark, did you want to come back in?
Excuse me, Chair. Perhaps I could just say, I think it's important that we work with all the unions that represent all our employees. So that's not just the Fire Brigades Union. And to that end, ACFO MacArthur and myself had a meeting last week with the national Unison official, who is very keen to also support us in our work. So I'd just like to say that, yes, we will have union involvement, but it'll be from all the unions. Yeah,
thank you for that, Chief. Mark, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just a couple of points that have been raised by members and just further confirmation. So our review is going to be check and work already done, so it should be more simple, and it's nothing like the review of authorities which have had issues, it sounds like. So that should be clearer. And I understand why we want to put a time frame in, but I'm just worried about voices not being heard, and that's going to be a real fine balance. So I would be interested in understanding the time frame set and why, and what do we deal with if we have historical cases raised, because we're a caring organisation. I can see the leadership is that way. So you would want to deal with all communication. So just any thoughts on that, please, Chair?
Yeah. I think anything prior to whatever the time frame is that's set, we'd want to use our usual mechanisms, quite frankly. And the fact that there are now more methods of alerting us to any behaviours that are inappropriate, then that's the mechanism we will use. I think anything that may have started in the past but is continuing, that definitely will be swept up within this review. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Brian Apsley. Brian?
Good morning, Chair, and everyone. I don't want to disagree with you, Chair, but I've got a concern about the timeframe and what limiting the timeframe may mean to us. I think I do at this point regard it as a negative because modern doesn't always mean good. And modern, as you well know, is always under the microscope, and you may well, and this might be a bit critical, you might well find that more experienced colleagues from the past, etc., may have a lot more common sense in their locker. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And it's certainly, I've got no problem if you want to disagree with me. I don't know if the Chief wants to comment in relation to the comments you've made.
I recognise that there may well be things that we can learn from the past. I guess at this moment in time, what we are concerned with is the culture of the here and now and what it might be in the future. And that might well be informed by things that happened in the past.
Thank you, Chief. David, dych chi eisiau dod I fewn?
Did you wish to come in? Thank you, Chair, and apologies for not asking before the meeting, but
who will be appointing the independent reviewer? Will it be in the gift of the two authorities or the Minister? And just going back to Gareth Jones's original question, I think such contracts, if they're now a gift, we could preclude that reviewer from being considered for further work, which would limit the money they can get out of us in future, or at least put it in the contract that it's an assumption that would occur.
Yes, it will be in the gift of the two fire authorities to determine who will undertake this work. The only stipulation that Welsh Government officials have made is that it should be no one with any current or previous connection to the fire and rescue sector.
Gareth, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's important that whoever does it has an understanding of the emergency services, slightly different culture, because obviously in an emergency situation, the culture has to be different. It has to be a JFDI, command and control structure. Obviously, the culture around it, about a lot of things we're talking about, is the same as in any other organisation. But I think it's important that whoever does the review has an understanding of what an emergency service culture needs to look like. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. I can't see any other hands being raised. Thank you for all the comments and questions. So if I can refer members to the two recommendations, namely that we note the contents of the paper and approve in principle the creation of a reserve to fund the independent review and supporting roles within the service. Could I have a proposer, please? Mark, thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Chris. Can you show that you approve the recommendations? That's been passed. Diolch yn fawr, pawb. So we go on to item number 8, which is the emergency cover review update, and over to the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Stuart Forshaw. Bore da, Stuart.
Bore da, Cadeirydd, and diolch yn fawr. Bore da, pawb. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report, members, is to provide you the latest position on the progress being made by the newly formed Emergency Cover Review Task and Finish Group. The group has been established in response to the decision made by the Fire Authority on its meeting of the 18th of December last year where members requested officers continue to work with all stakeholders to develop a new permanent option, taking into consideration today's decision and the limits of the proposed budget. Therefore, a request for expression of interest was sought from staff working at all levels across the service departments, stations and duty systems, and an emergency cover review task and finish group was established in January this year. Officers received a positive response from this request, resulting in a task and finish group comprising of 12 colleagues representing the fire stations, 4 colleagues representing corporate service departments, and 2 representatives from the Fire Brigades Union also being established. The group held its first meeting on the 1st of February this year, where members agreed their terms of reference, and they also appointed the chair and a vice chair from within the group. It was at this meeting that the group also received presentations on the current level of emergency cover provision, the process undertaken every day to cover gaps in emergency cover, and the financial constraints that any option have to deliver against. Therefore, the Emergency Cover Review Task and Finish Group has aimed to start afresh, understanding the challenges around the current pre-planning and daily interventions needed to support the provision of a more equitable emergency cover, and then explore how improvements in effectiveness and efficiency can be delivered within the budget, especially during the daytime. The group have also accepted that improvements in emergency cover, particularly in more rural areas of North Wales, are required, and understand that any proposals they put forward must meet the emergency cover review evaluation criteria used throughout the development of the options and the public consultation undertaken last year. To date, the group have met on a number of occasions, with their 5th and most recent meeting being held on the 3rd of April. Meetings are conducted in person and, importantly, across the service area at different venues to increase their visibility and accessibility for all staff. And following each meeting, the group members are tasked with speaking to their colleagues back within their workplaces to gauge feedback on the ideas being discussed in order that the wider workforce remain informed on progress. Colleagues from across the workforce are also encouraged to bring their ideas forward to the Emergency Cover Review Task and Finish Group representatives for inclusion in the group discussions. Members of the Fire Authority will be updated on the progress of the group's option development in the coming months, prior to any option being presented to the authority in the summer for a decision. So therefore, members, it's recommended that you are asked to note the engagements of all stakeholders on the Emergency Cover Review Task and Finish Group to work together to develop options that deliver improvements in emergency cover for the community in North Wales, and note the progress made by the Task and Finish Group to date. Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair, and I'm now happy to take any questions that members may have.
So thank you, Stuart. Perhaps I could begin by asking a question, and I think it's very positive to hear that sort of the group recognise that that the problem is still out there and that we do need to try and find a solution to tackle the problem. But can I put you on the spot and ask, are we actually making any progress in identifying some possible viable solutions that will help to alleviate the problem?
Well, Chair, yes, the progress is being made within the discussions, and not only have the group had presentations from members of the finance team and our availability team just to understand the problem, they've also started looking across the UK fire and rescue service sector as a whole, and that's included other fire and rescue services who are using different ways of delivering an emergency response, whether that's through change of duty systems, changes in the way that they staff fire engines, and actually receiving presentations from officers and colleagues working within those other services, just to see what it's like across the UK as a whole, because as we discussed last year, we are not the only fire and rescue service that has this problem to solve regarding daytime availability, especially across our retained duty system, more rural area stations. So they have come up with a number of ideas, which they've been encouraged to experiment with, discuss in more detail with colleagues out on stations, engage any kind of interest, engage opinion. They are now refining those options that they've discussed down to a couple, and they're being encouraged to actually come up with what would be a viable option before the next Fire Authority meeting in July, when we can hopefully come in and update members in more detail on what that option would look like. Clearly, that then has to be agreed by yourselves before we then go into any consultation negotiation with any rep bodies and the wider workforce.
Great, thank you, sir. It sounds like a case of watch this space, hopefully. Cynghorydd Gwynfor Owen. Gwynfor, diolch.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr Cadeirydd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to read in the report and to hear now that the group has been meeting in various places. Can I ask whether the group has met in Southern Gwynedd at all? That is to say, one of the areas that is underserved, and I would just like to know where the group has met. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Councillor Owen. I don't have the actual venues to hand, but I can provide them with you. I do know that there are representatives from Southern Gwynedd area, from those fire stations, and also from Carnarvon as well. I know of one firefighter who works at Carnarvon, and I know that they have held one meeting in Carnarvon for sure. But what I will do is provide you with the venues, because they are meeting across the service area to make sure that that spread of visibility is seen.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch. Afwyn? Dych chi ar mute, Afwyn?
You're on mute, Arwyn. Thank you very much, Stuart, for the report. One question I have to ask, Stuart mentioned the option that was placed before us in July. The question I have is how many options will be put before the authority? Will it just be one, or will there be a couple put before us?
Diolch yn fawr, Councillor Roberts. So the aspiration is to provide you with one option, and that option also importantly has to be not fundamentally different to the option that we went out to consultation with during the summer. So the Task and Finish group have been asked to identify an option that will still deliver those additional 3 stations across the more rural areas, because that was, if you remember, what was which was accepted by members of the public when we went out to public consultation. I suppose the challenge for them is that you were presented with one way of providing those 3 stations. That was with option 1A, which actually was going to deliver a potentially 4th station with the movement of one of our whole-time fire appliances from Wrexham. What they've got to do is try and look at another method, is how they can deliver those additional 3 stations. Anything fundamentally different from that would I suppose, come into the realms of, do we need to go out to public consultation again? And obviously that's a discussion that we'll have to have if that appears. But the aspiration is not to come up with something that isn't fundamentally different to what was previously consulted on, and then you to be presented with that option.
Are there any other questions? Chief, do you want to come in?
It's really just for members' awareness. We said that we are not alone trying to improve this situation, and Mid and West Wales Fire and Rescue Service are doing exactly the same exercise that we did last year. They are undertaking an emergency cover review because they have exactly the same problem that we have. We have guaranteed cover along the coast, along the top of North Wales, and no guaranteed cover during the day for the rest of our area. And they have guaranteed cover along the bottom of their service area and no guaranteed cover for the rest. So between us, this grows into a bigger issue. This is like 2/3 of the whole of Wales not having guaranteed cover during daytime. So that's why both ourselves and Mid and West are trying to address this issue.
Thank you, Chief. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just quickly, Giacomo, thank you, Chair. So I'm just wondering how, if this work is, it's live, and we're obviously going to start working on the budget for this coming new financial term we're working on. So how's that timing working? I'm sure Helen's got it in her mind how it's going to work, but it'd be good for members to understand, because one's going to have an impact on the other. So I just wondered what work had gone on between relevant officers with that, please.
Chair, I'm happy to pick that up. The working group, it also has representation from finance, and the financial envelope at the moment is the existing budget. So within that, any proposal that comes forward should be achievable within our existing financial position.
Chair, and I can just add as well, just regarding the timescales as well, Councillor Young, is that we are looking for them to provide the option for July, as mentioned, and that then will cut time nicely to when budget setting starts again for our authority meetings towards the end of the year, when we should have what would be the option for implementation from April next year. So that's why really the task and finish group is being asked to come up with something to provide to July, so then we can do the work throughout the rest of this year in preparation for the start of the next financial year.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for that, Giacomo. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions before we move on? I can't see any hands being raised. So you've heard what the two recommendations are. Can I have somebody to propose, please? Thank you, Chris. Can seconder? Thank you, Rob. Can you show that you approve the recommendations? Diolch yn fawr. So we go on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 9, the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy for 2024 to 2029. And I think this is back to you, Stuart, again to present, please. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. So members, this paper presents what is our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy 2024 to 2029. And this follows its consultation with members of the authority and staff across the service, which was approved for consultation by members at the exec panel on the 18th of March. The strategy presents our commitments relating to ED&I and sets out how we propose to meet them. In Wales, the legal framework for equality, diversity and inclusion is primarily governed by the Equality Act 2010. And this legislation sets out the public sector equality duty, which requires public bodies, including fire and rescue services, to consider the needs of individuals with protected characteristics in the development and delivery of policies, services and employment practices. Under the duty, public bodies must have a due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations between people who share a protected characteristic and those who do not. We are required to publish information demonstrating our compliance with this general duty, as well as our equality objectives that we have set and our progress made towards meeting them. The strategy details other legal requirements, including the Welsh Language Wales Measure 2011, and notwithstanding these requirements, we have a well-established commitment to promoting and encouraging the Welsh language amongst staff, stakeholders and the public, and recognition of our moral obligations to protect the cultural heritage of the area. The development of the EDI strategy is being supported by staff representatives and staff network leads within the services ED&I committee. It has been in development for just over a year now and represents many hours of discussions and engagements with everybody across the service. The strategy has also been influenced by our extensive engagements and consultation work undertaken with community groups recently. The strategy complements the people theme of our community risk management plan and will run alongside it, setting out our commitment to meet the needs of our diverse communities. And we will do this by seeking to understand and address the specific challenges our communities face. As we know, equality is not about treating everyone the same. It's about ensuring that access to opportunities is available to all by taking account of people's differences. This requires a proactive approach to engagements and culturally competent workforce who can provide targeted support to help individuals and stay safe and well. The strategy, you will see, has 4 brief themes that set the cornerstones for our future equality action planning. 2 of these themes have an internal focus, looking at how we further embed inclusivity in our organisational culture and how we attract, recruit and retain diverse talent. The other 2 themes have a focus on delivering inclusive services to our communities and ensuring that we continue to develop effective partnerships that enhance our EDI knowledge and expertise and extend our outreach into our communities. At the heart of these themes are the principles that everyone should be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their background or identity, and a commitment to work tirelessly to advance equality of opportunity, whilst eliminating discrimination and provide good relations between different people. The strategy is one aspect of our cultural journey, and we will help to create a fire and rescue service that is representative of the communities it serves, and one that is trusted and respected within our communities. The implementation of the EDI strategy will be guided by a detailed annual EDI action plan, which will be managed by the service's ED&I committee, which meets quarterly and I chair. We will also produce an EDI performance report every 6 months that will be submitted to the Service Leadership Team Performance Board to outline progress against the service's equality priorities. The strategy sets out our vision for an organisation that provides high quality services that are accessible and relevant to everyone in our communities. An organisation that has an inclusive culture where all of us can belong, bringing our whole self to work and can flourish. Therefore, members, it's recommended that you are asked to note the content of the report and approve the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy 2024 to 2029. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions again from members.
Thank you, Stuart. Just one comment and one question from me. First of all, just to sort of remind members that this strategy has been scrutinised already by the executive panel, who are happy to approve it. And I think I'm right in saying, Stuart, that we have now appointed a members EDI champion. Is that correct?
We have, Chair, yes, and Councillor Dolman is our members EDI champion, and I'm sure everyone will kind of join me in welcoming her to our EDI committee, which will meet in the next few weeks, when I'm hoping that Councillor Dolman will be able to attend.
That's great. Thank you, Sharon, for your commitment to the role. Number of hands being raised, starting with Brian. Brian Apsley. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick thanks for the well-prepared paperwork, which makes this easier to understand for lay members. So thank you very much for the paperwork.
Thank you, Brian. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick one. So I'll be supporting this really good piece of work, and the cultural day we had was excellent. It was just going to ask for confirmation of Stuart about the communication behind this, because although the day we attended was good, I didn't know about some of the networks, and I think it's important that we share what we are doing. So any thoughts on how we can get the comms better so we're all aware of what's going on and the good work we're doing? Thank you. Diolch.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Young. So I think obviously the role of Councillor Dolman now being on the committee is really important, and I'm sure that having first-hand experience now as an authority member on the committee to see the great work that's being done across the service, then will be really useful for members. I think as well, we've got the weekly brief, which members now receive, and that contains a lot of the great work that's being done regarding not only just ED&I, but also all areas of the service, when it comes to the culture that we have here and the culture that we're also, looking to continually improve. So I'll take that away. I'm sure that myself and Tracy Williams, who's the head of our comms team, will have a think about the way that we can communicate some of this great work going forward, if we feel that we need to do a little bit more of that other than the...
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Gwynfor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on theme 2, recruiting and retaining talented people. I'm just concerned often with a number of bodies that they don't look enough at the essentials of a job. They make an advertisement or a job description. For example, one essential that is put in very often is the need to have a current driving license. Now, did you ask why a current driving license is necessary? Perhaps they need to go to a meeting somewhere once a month. That doesn't mean that one has to be able to drive to go to that place. The fact very often that they ask for a driving license as essential alienates particularly a number of disabled people, because there's a high portion of disabled people who cannot drive. And so just to remind us, above all, that we need to look carefully at the essentials of every job when we make the job description. Thank you very much.
Diolch Gwynfor. I don't know, Stuart, if you wanted to respond to that or just me.
Yeah, it's a point well made. The councillor, and we have different essential criteria for all the roles, various roles across the service, but yeah, it's certainly something that is noted, and we will continue to do. Thank you.
Diolch Gwynfor. I can't see any other hands being raised, so can I invite you to approve the two recommendations that are before you? Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Gareth. Will you show that you approve the recommendations? Diolch yn fawr iawn. That's been passed. So we now go on to item number 10, which is the North Wales Healthy Travel Charter, and over to Assistant Chief Fire Officer Justin Evans. Croeso, Justin.
Croeso, diolch fawr, Cadeirydd. Bore da pawb. This paper outlines the obligations prescribed within the North Wales Healthy Travel Charter and sets out the practical considerations needed to implement them. The North Wales Healthy Travel Charter is overseen by Public Health Wales and aligns with Welsh Government strategies on transportation, decarbonisation and public health. The Charter has been developed by Betsy Cadwaladr University Health Board Health Team in partnership with key organisations across North Wales, which include the 6 local authorities, Sustrans, Natural Resources Wales and Transport for Wales. The Charter provides a framework of action on communications and leadership, public transport, walking, cycling, agile working and ultra-low emission vehicles. Many of the Charter's obligations can be achieved through the delivery of our fleet decarbonisation plan and our environmental strategy. These are through actions ranging from promoting healthy travel options to assessing and providing the necessary infrastructure for sustainable transportation. Members will have noted 2 tables in the paper. Table 1 outlines how our existing policies already meet many of the Charter's commitments, and for the commitments not yet met, practical actions have been agreed by our service leadership team, and these are detailed within Table 2. Signing the Charter represents a significant milestone for us in our journey towards a more sustainable and inclusive future. By aligning our practices with the Charter's principles, we affirm our commitment to the well-being of our communities and the preservation of our environment. Our approach to meeting the Charter's commitments extends beyond mere compliance. It reflects our approach to inclusivity, well-being and environmental stewardship. And by establishing a network of sustainable travel champions and collaborating with partners, we aim to foster a culture of active and sustainable travel within our organisation and beyond. Compliance with the Charter aligns with the authority's long-term improvement and wellbeing objectives, and it has no known budgetary or staffing impacts. Ratification of the Charter was endorsed by the Executive Panel on December the 18th, 2023, and the Charter ratification signifies a significant step forward in our commitment to sustainable travel practices. It is recommended that members endorse the ratification of the North Wales Healthy Travel Charter under the following terms: that the Chief Fire Officer is delegated to sign the Charter on behalf of the authority, that the Environment and Climate Change Manager be designated as our single point of contact for the scheme, and that compliance is reported through the Flintshire and Wrexham Public Service Board. Thank you, Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Justin. And so just to remind members, as Justin has pointed out, that this paper has already been scrutinised and approved by the Executive Panel. So any questions or comments from members, please? No, I can't see any hands being raised. In that case, can I invite somebody to propose that we accept the recommendations? Thank you, Mark. Seconder. Thank you, Brian. Will you show that you approve, please? Diolch yn fawr. That report has been approved. So we go on to the next item, which is item 11, the provisional outturn for 2023-24. And over to Assistant Chief Fire Officer Helen MacArthur. Bore da, Helen.
Borodar, thank you, Chair. This item is actually going to be led by the Treasurer, so we have a number of financial papers on the agenda, and we're going to mix and match with who presents them. So, David, are you happy to pick this up?
Yeah, diolch Helen. Diolch
Yes,
Cadeirydd.
thank you, Helen, and thank you, Chair. There are a number of items before us today. This is the only one that has been through some form of previous scrutiny. The four following items have all, this is the only one that hasn't, rather. The others have all been through either audit committee or the executive panel. So some of the members are familiar with those. But this is a new paper. The provisional outturn for the year just ended. Provisional because there is more work to be done to close the accounts, and there are always things coming out and doing that final report, but it will be quite close in terms of the situation at close of accounts. And I would like to thank the staff working hard on that as we speak. These forecasts of capital and revenue expenditure for the year that finished on the 31st March, well, this reports on the situation as it stood at the end of February. Some of you will remember that a budget was approved back in January 23, and at that time, it was quite a difficult period. We foresaw that we were going to spend 44.6 million, but that included national wage settlements, which finished up above the budgetary provision and the general pressure because of inflation, which has been very high in that period since then. The capital budget for this year, for 23-24, was 6.5 million. But that included 3 million for the training center that is proposed, and we are expecting that to be completed in financial year 24-25 now, the one that has just started. So we foresee that the capital expenditure will be about 2.2 million, and we will need to roll that over on the relevant projects. The report asks that you note the draft revenue and capital outturns, and it notes the risks and recommends the use of reserves. I will just explain why there is an element of use of reserves. In paragraph 8, you can see there, in determining the budget, you approved a range of measures that had an impact on the provision of services and corporate capacity. These included deferring expenditure and the use of earmarked and general reserves in the year. That was foreseen from the very beginning in setting the budget, and it was necessary to deal with things. We're losing grant income from the government because of contracts, and as I have noted with the uncertainty regarding the national wage negotiations at that time. And as paragraph 13 notes, the pay award for firefighters was settled in February 23, about a month after you set the budget. And in February 23, it was confirmed that a figure of 7% was accepted from July 22, with another 5% from July 23 onwards. That was higher than we had assumed. So that is to say 5 and 4% when we set the budget. So there was a gap from the beginning to be filled, and that is the main reason that we are going into the reserves for funding. Luckily, it's not so much of as much of a need as we had foreseen during the year. On the capital aspect, the capital funding costs include borrowing costs. There will be underspend on that because, well, on the revenue in paragraph 17 onwards, we do foresee an overspend, but only about £250,000. That is about 0.6% of the budget, and that is mainly on salaries, as mentioned with the National Pay Awards, and the sum is smaller than the overspend that we had foreseen during the year, and we had foreseen that this might have become 0.9 million. That was our mid-year estimate, but mainly because of expenditure on pay and less on pay and a significant pension refund from the Clwyd Pension Fund following a re-evaluation. There are details of that in the following report. In paragraph 18, we talk about having spent less on staff by not filling certain vacancies in our structure during the year. That is part of the original plan to find some one-off savings and to limit recruitment to on-call centres. So that has happened, and we have found some savings. There will be a recruitment process, and which is currently ongoing, to replace staff that have retired during the year. I am aware of recruitment events taking place in Porthmadog and Abersoch recently. That is ongoing across the region, as I understand it. So, although we've made one-off savings, it does not mean that we are doing without staff forever. Then, as it says in paragraph 22, we are having a significant refund, £500,000 from the Clwyd Pension Fund following an actuarial valuation. This is a one-off payment. The Pensions Fund has decided that we are to receive that as a one-off payment, which suits us, in fact, because that brings us much closer to the budget in a difficult year. And some other pension funds have dealt with this by bringing future contributions down, but a one-off payment has suited us, suited a number of employers in the Clwyd Pension Fund because they found it a difficult year. Moving on to things other than pay, in paragraph 25, since the last report, there has been delay regarding goods and services, and as a consequence, that has reduced the overspend to some extent because of that. That's a smaller sum. And of course, most of our budget on pay, but unfortunately, with the delay in the supply of some goods, such as fire kits, that has put pressure on 24-25 budget. With regard to property, premises, well, we've overspent, but it is a reduction from what had been foreseen. The details are there in paragraph 27 onwards. And in paragraph 30, we talk about having benefited from the reduction in non-domestic rates. That does not mean that the rate has gone down. That is because of appeals to the tribunal on a number of fire stations and so on, where the valuer has had to bring the assessment of that property down. And then transport, the transport budget, well, there's a variance that is up. We had foreseen 0.1 million variance, that is up to 3,500 because of an increase in cost of fuel. We've all seen during the year that has just come to an end. We know how the costs of diesel and so on have gone up significantly. Supplies, an overspend. In paragraph 32, we talk about an overspend of just over £1 million there. That is down from what we had foreseen for a number of reasons, but mainly, as we mentioned in paragraph 36, when buying additional fire kits, the negotiations have been ongoing throughout Wales on the supply of that kit, and because of the delay in supply, that fire kit will not be supplied until the year that has just started, 24-25. And then the accountants have earmarked a budget in the reserves for dealing with that in the following year. Third-party payments, there's a marginal overspend there, nothing major. Capital financing, once again, no major change there. Capital, paragraph 50 onwards, the two changes that there have been in the page on the table on page under paragraph 55, the two that have changed are fleet, where the falls prevention system has, and also the proposed training centre. Those are the biggest rollovers. And borrowing in the short term, as noted in paragraph 56, in the short term, the authority has used internal borrowing, which means that we have avoided going to external borrowing during 23-24. Then using reserves. As a context for you, paragraph 60 notes that at the moment the authority has reserves, earmarked reserves to a value of 6.2 million. So it's not a problem to look for a sum such as mentioned in paragraph 62. The provisional outturn assumes that the contribution from reserves for the year just finished will be 270,000. There's nothing of concern in the prudential indicators following from paragraph 63 on. So clearly, I invite questions for either Helen or myself, but to take you back to the recommendations on page 44 in the Welsh, where once again we ask for you to note the projections, note the risks, and to approve the use of reserve funds as I have outlined, Mr. Chairman. So I'm open to any questions. Thank you for that very comprehensive overview.
David or for Helen, please. Gareth?
Yes, diolch, Cadeirydd. On page 54, we list a number of capital expenditures. Just wondering the scrutiny involved with that. In Denbighshire County Council, we have a capital scrutiny group which examines every project coming to us for capital spend, and we evaluate it against spend to save, basically. Are those things going to save us money in the long term, given the fact that we have very short allowance for money these days? Is that what sort of scrutiny are there on those projects going forward?
Thank you for that question. I don't know if it's Helen or David is going to answer that.
I'm happy to pick that up, Chair. The schemes outlined within the paper are ones that have been approved, but I think it's fair to say that the future work of the Budget Scrutiny Working Group will be to include review of proposed capital projects for exactly that reason. Some things we absolutely have to do, such as the replacement of fire appliances, but other schemes have a more discretionary element, and certainly the Budget Scrutiny Working Group will be considering each of those.
Thank you, Helen. Does that answer your question, Gareth?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Perhaps I could raise a question. Paragraph 34 that begins with the largest element of expenditure relates to the National Firelink contract, which is an annual cost of 0.84 million. This is under the heading of supplies. And then it goes on to say that, however, at this stage, an implementation date is not known for ESMCP, and there is no alternative to the Firelink contract. Previously, support of 0.4.2 million was received from the Welsh Government, but this was withdrawn from the 1st of April 2023 and remains an ongoing cost pressure. So it is disappointing that we've had funding withdrawn by the Welsh Government, and going forward, it seems that there's no alternative. And I'm just concerned about what if the costs of this project's control and we don't actually have any means of sort of controlling that. I don't know if you're able to comment on that, Helen.
Thank you. It very much is a national challenge, not only for our sector, but also for other emergency service providers as well. Certainly, there is a national group looking at this. I think it is recognised that it's a challenge. The implementation date for the new system is likely to be 2029, 2030. There is also a national legal challenge on the increase in costs inherent within the contract. There is an inflationary increase each year, and clearly over the last couple of years that's been quite significant. Beyond that, I'm afraid I can't give very much assurance, saving except for the fact that we are looking at all of our spend, so where to reduce down the number of units that we have, where it's practical to do so, and whilst maintaining our ability to operate. So it's a challenging circumstance for us.
Thank you, Helen. Chief, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, only to say that I understood the Welsh Government's argument that they felt that the grant that they gave towards this was for day-to-day running costs. However, I was disappointed that in England there was a decision that this grant would be removed, but it would be tapered over 3 years, whilst we were just notified within days of the budget being set that this would be withdrawn. So that was an added challenge. I think that the more you get notification of funding that is being withdrawn, the more you have the opportunity to make changes that will reflect that. And no, we have absolutely no control over this project. This is a national emergency services project.
Thank you, Chief, for that information. Mark, do you want to come in?
Giacomo, thank you, Chair. So item 36, we know we've done a lot of work going on with purchasing extra fire kit for protection, etc. But the overspend is substantial. So just some background on that, because obviously when you're doing so much work to save, as we did last year, £1 million, then to see an overspend of over 400,000 is substantial. So any thoughts on that and what we're doing moving forward to try and manage that situation? Thank you.
In respect to the fire kit, a lot of the purchases are I suppose, influenced by the work of the Contaminants Working Group. Historically, a fire kit had a lifespan, and that's dependent on the number of washes. Due to the work of contaminants, fire kits are washed much more regularly, and that's particularly relevant in our training sector, where an individual might have a change of kit, perhaps 1 or 2 on a day. So we absolutely need to have those kits. Also, given the nature and the diverse nature of our workforce, we have people various shapes and sizes, heights, etc., etc. So it's important that we have appropriate kit. So whilst it is quite a significant cost in this year, we believe that this will provide us with the kit we need in training, and a little bit of resilience should we be able to recruit from a diverse workforce. It is, however, beyond doubt, an essential part of functioning that we have to meet. I'm not sure if that fully answers your question.
Yeah, no. So it should be more manageable moving forward. Actually understand the kit, and maybe we need a bigger budget line in for it. But that answer sort of responds well. Thank you.
And part of the mitigation of that is we're also purchasing wildfire kit, and that wildfire kit will help and support prolonging the life of the gold kit as well. So we are where possible taking alternative measures, but it is just something that we're carefully managing.
Okay, thank you.
Just on the subject of kit, Helen, can I ask, is the kit reusable? I'm thinking that that we do sort of have sort of RDS firefighters who sort of we lose in terms of their employment. So if they have their kit, is that reusable, or once it's used by an individual, can it not be used again?
No, it's fully reusable. So effectively, every time it is laundered, they do a physical inspection, and it's laundered and maintained. So providing it comes back in a serviceable state, it's very much put back into service.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments regarding this report? I can't see any hands being raised, so can I refer you to the recommendations, and can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Jeff. And a seconder. Thank you, Mark. Will you show that you approve, please? Diolch. That's been approved. So we go on to item number 12, which is the pay policy statement. And is this you, Helen, or is it back to David? I'm not sure.
No, this one is me. Diolch. So the pay policy statement is a document which is prepared on an annual basis, and I anticipate that members will be familiar with it, both from previous years in the authority, but also from your own council. The statement is required as part of the Localism Act, and coupled with guidance from the Welsh Government, its overall aim is to provide transparency with regards to the pay structure, and that's the pay structure for all employees. In summary, the statement provides information on remuneration of chief officers and employees on the lowest pay scale, but it also provides information on the methods by which we determine the salaries for all staff. Chair, I won't go through the report line by line, but there are a number of important aspects that I'd like to draw to the attention of yourselves as members. So within the report, section 3.2 highlights that for all staff groups, we use national pay scales where they exist, and we also participate in collective bargaining arrangements. This includes both a cost of living annual review, which members will be familiar with from the budget setting process, but also it's one that's followed within your own councils. And at the time of writing this report, the increase for 2024-25 has not been finalised for staff conditioned on the green, grey or blue book contracts of service. The pay scales for grey book colleagues, who are those working in operational roles from firefighter through to area manager, and including our control colleagues, they're agreed nationally. And the pay scales for staff on green or blue contracts of service are agreed locally through a formal job evaluation process. Sections 4, 5 and 6 deal with the arrangements for the remuneration of the Chief Fire Officer and senior staff, including the Principal Officer team, the Monitoring Officer and also the Treasurer. National pay scales don't exist for these roles, and the salaries are benchmarked periodically against the sector averages. And notably, as you'll see from section 8, we do not pay bonuses or performance-related pay for any staff member, and that includes senior staff. Section 9 provides the reader with a summary table of all of our employee groups, including the terms and conditions of service and their pension arrangements. And members will note that a lease car is provided to fire officers who are required to attend operational incidents as part of their role. Our lowest paid employee is the equivalent of £23,893 per annum, and that's correct as at April 2023. That equates to £12.38 per hour and is above the government's real living wage for 24-25. And the pay multiple with the CFO is 1 to 5.8. And again, that's within the spirit of the Hudson Review, which set a maximum multiple of 20 times. The multiple with a median full-time is 1 to 4.32. We also provide a range of support measures for all staff, and that includes access to physiotherapy, corporate discounts, and employee assistance packages. And we don't routinely employ individuals through their own personal service companies, which are more often termed off-payroll arrangements and subject to quite negative press. I would refer members also to the appendices, which set out salary scales for all applicable to all staff, noting that for staff conditioned to grey, green and blue, that those figures relate to 23-24, because the figures haven't yet been finalised. This report was fully considered by the executive panel at its meeting on the 18th of March, but I'm happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. As you say, that the report has already been considered by the executive panel and the recommendations endorsed. Are there any questions or comments for Helen, please? I can't see any hands being raised. It is a straightforward report, so can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Gwynfor. Diolch yn fawr, Gwynfor. And a seconder? Diolch, Gareth. If you show that you approve, diolch yn fawr. That has been passed. So we go on to the next item, which is the Treasury Management Strategy for 2024-25. Back to you, Helen, is it?
Back to David, thank you.
No, lucky David, diolch.
Diolch, Dylan. Yeah, to me, to you, Dora.
Thank you, Helen. The Treasury Management Strategy 24-25. This is a report that has been before the Audit Committee on that day about a month ago. The members had an introduction from specialist consultants, Alan Close, who gave who put some of this strategy in context, and it was quite an intelligible presentation for those members, I hope. And I hope with some of the Audit Committee members will remember. So I hope I can go through it in general terms rather than through every word. We are now presenting the strategy for the year from April 2024 to March 25, and this strategy shows how the authority will manage its borrowings and investments for the coming year. What we ask you as members is that you approve the strategy this morning. It is a requirement for the full body, that is to say the authority in our case, to approve this, while the Audit Committee has the delegated right to deal with monitoring during the year. And the strategy itself is in Appendix 1 to the report. And in general terms, in investing, the authority will keep to the SLI principles, as we call them, where it's an acronym for security, liquidity, and yield. That is noted in paragraph 10 of the report in that order. So we look at the security first, then the liquidity, that we have money when we need it, and then the returns to make the most of the gains on our investments. The authority will continue to borrow to fund capital expenditure. As I reported earlier this morning, we had to take an additional loan in the previous year. We do borrow as we need, and we estimate that we will borrow 5.67 million to fund the capital spending. There is an estimate that the interest on will be around 1.8 million during the year, and the detailed strategy is on page 78 to 95 in Welsh. There is a recommendation in paragraph 4 on page 75 of the pack. And we ask that you approve the Treasury Management Strategy for 24 to 25. Give the element of dependency on your fellow members who have had a much more detailed presentation in the Audit Committee. And I'm happy to take questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, David.
I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add, seeing it's been before you for school. Don't know, Mark, if you got that. Did you want to come in at all and say anything as the chair of the scrutiny committee?
Yeah, no, sorry, I missed that. No, happy with the report and happy to support. We've We've done a lot of work on this. I think members and officers work well together, so happy to support and no questions. Giacomo, thank you.
Yeah, so any questions or comments from members? Can't see any hands being raised, but as we say, it's already been scrutinised thoroughly by the audit committee. Can I therefore have a proposer, please? Diolch Mark, diolch Gareth. Will you show that you approve the report? Diolch fawr pawb. That's been approved. So we move on now to item 14, which is the capital strategy for 2024 to 34. I'm not sure which member of the double act is now on. Is it Helen?
Oh, Helen did it.
Over to me. I think members by now will probably fully appreciate that the audit committee on the 18th of March was a very technical heavy meeting, and we also discussed the capital strategy. You're correct that it does actually cover the next 10 years, and it covers the period 2024 to 2034. And it certainly may seem a long planning timescale, but it also recognises the need for the planning and coordination of our financial resources to achieve our objectives. It also links very nicely to the revenue outturn paper that we've got on the agenda today, as we don't receive a separate funding stream for capital items, which would be very helpful, but they are generally funded from borrowing. On occasions, we are able to sell assets, but largely the vast majority of our assets don't have a residual value, or they relate to our buildings, which we don't tend to sell. And therefore, what we need to recognise is that all of our capital decisions have a revenue consequence. Capital expenditure relates to the purchase of assets that will be held and used for a 12-month period, but they can actually span for periods beyond 50 years in the case of buildings. So very much the decision you make today has that long-term consequence. The longevity of our capital assets isn't just limited to our buildings, and you will know that our fire appliances have a useful life of between 15 and 18 years. And with other vehicles such as our technical response unit or the aerial ladder platform being longer again. So from this perspective, a 10-year plan suddenly starts to look slightly short-term in nature. However, the 10-year plan can never be set in stone as the operating environment changes, technology changes and evolves, and therefore this is only intended to be a high-level document which effectively steers the direction against which we'll make decisions on an annual basis. The underpinning document is the authority's CRMP for 2024-29, which sets our corporate direction and the principles for the next 5 years. And the important issue is that we invest through the capital programme in projects and schemes that address the issues arising from these principles. In essence, in a financially constrained world, we need to ensure that our resources are utilised to best effect, and the capital investment supports this. I think that was previously highlighted in the revenue report, and it includes ensuring not only that our initial investment is sound, but that we have proper arrangements for maintaining the asset over its useful life when it remains affordable. To that end, we do have internal processes. So when one of our managers identifies a capital need, they complete a business case, and those business cases are subject to scrutiny, and they will come through the budget scrutiny working group. And that includes not only that capital cost, but the affordability, but the ongoing revenue consequences. So taking the aerial ladder platform, purchase cost might be $500,000, but on an annual basis, we know that we need to service it, we need to maintain it, we need to insure it. So at every decision point, it's making sure that we understand the full cost. I'll draw members' attention to the 10-year capital plan. And this is based on known bids, but it's also anticipated that on an annual basis, these bids will be refined, recosted, and there will also be a need to reprioritise as items become apparent. It does provide a very good overview of the anticipated expenditure, and as members can see, this includes significant investment in the financial years 28-29 and 29-30 in fire appliances. Notably, there is no current additional provision for the training centre above and beyond the land, and this will be considered separately by members, and the capital strategy will be revised at that time. The strategy also includes the funding mechanism, which is external debt, and considerations given to the impact on our revenue. I'd like to draw your attention to the table within section 6, which confirms that this is between 5.6 and 7.5%. On an annual basis, members will be required to approve the in-year capital plan as part of that budget setting, which again ensures that you have that due diligence in place and that scrutiny is present. As confirmed, this strategy was considered by members at the Audit Committee, and I'm happy to take any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Dear Helen, any questions or comments from members, please? I can't see any hands being raised. Obviously, they have full confidence in the scrutiny process that's taken place through the Audit Committee. Well done, Mark. Can I have somebody in that case to propose that we do approve the capital strategy for the next 10 years, please? Diolch, Mark. Diolch, Chris. If you all show that's been approved. Diolch. So we go on to item 15, which is the financial reserve strategy. And I think I've got it right in saying, David, dych chi nôl ymlaen?
Are you back on? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. No, back to Helen once more on this.
Chair, I do apologise. I think we've confused matters. But the reserve strategy is the last financial paper on the agenda today. And again, this was another paper that was considered by the Audit Committee at its meeting on the 18th of March. It relates to the reserve strategy and it was last reviewed and approved by members in January 2021. And whilst it still is valid, it's good practice to review the strategy to ensure that it's consistent with the approach that you as members would wish to adopt. You will be aware that the reserves are reported within the annual statement of accounts, and by way of a recap, I think it might be helpful to outline the nature of the authority's reserves. And in very broad terms, they fall into two categories, usable or unusable. The unusable reserves arise from technical accounting arrangements, and as members will see from the strategy, include the revaluation reserve, capital adjustment reserve, and also the pensions reserve. The pensions reserve is actually a negative reserve because our firefighters' pension fund doesn't have underlying assets. Notably, they're not cash backed and cannot be utilised in any way. I'd also refer members to the table within section 6 of the report, which provides further details on each of those reserves. However, turning to the usable reserves, these are ones that can be utilised, and members will recognise the importance of this, given the challenging financial situation that the public sector as a whole faces at this time. And the usable reserves fall into two distinct categories. Those that are established for a specific known purpose, and those that are general in nature. And in terms of those specific reserves, they will cover a broad range, everything from potential loss of grants through to requirement for PPE, through to known building projects. The current and anticipated earmarked reserves were detailed within the medium-term resource strategy, which was approved by the Fire Authority in December. And as at the end of March 2023, they stood at 6.2 million. And the earmarked reserves relates to areas of known or anticipated costs where it's considered prudent to put money aside. And that effectively helps manage the future financial demands, and it also helps to cushion the impact of uneven cash flows. And we've seen experience of that today in the financial report, where we've talked about a need in a particular year to purchase PPE for our firefighters. Those uneven cash flows can also relate to such things as items that were deferred in year, and that's very often the case for our capital schemes, or because future costs are anticipated and need to be managed. The earmarked reserves do cover a broad range of headings and include such things as training systems, improvements, transformation, but we also put a buffer in place for such things as legal liabilities, major incidents and inflation. In contrast, the general reserve is held as a contingency, and that helps cushion the impact of an unprecedented event or an emergency, or higher than anticipated level activities. So by way of an example, if activity was to spike due to spate conditions, then the general reserve would be the first port of call. There is no prescriptive guidance on the level of reserves that should be held. Pardon me. And you will appreciate that this is a difficult balance to achieve. And it's always a tension of the financial pressures today versus that stability in future years. So it's very relevant at the current time. The authority is responsible for determining the reserves, but this is undertaken following advice and guidance from the officers within the service, who in turn take into consideration the known plans, the risks and the uncertainties. And in this respect, the budget setting process has due regard for a range of issues that includes anticipated inflation, variability of interest rates, capital receipts and expenditure. Also, we take into consideration service plans and their priorities. By an example of that would be the contamination work. We also need to have due regard for any financial risks, and in more recent years, that has related to the grant funding received from the Welsh Government. In this respect, professional support is provided both by David as the Treasurer and by myself, and also through the Head of Finance. The strategy was considered by the Audit Committee and endorsed with a recommendation for approval by yourselves. Chair, I'm happy to take any queries that members may have.
Yeah, Helen, questions and comments from members invited, please. I can't see any hands being raised. David, dych chi siarad i fewn?
Just not
David, did you want to come in? Just to note, Mr. Chairman, once more, this has been before the Audit Committee where we had a useful discussion, and we shall report again on the position on reserves as they close down during the next meeting. So it was something that we will be revisiting soon. Thank you, David.
Thank Helen again for the excellent comprehensive work that you've done in relation to these 4 reports that we've considered, and also to Mark and the work of the Audit Committee. So can I have a proposer, please? Diolch, Gareth. Seconder. Thank you, Mark. If you show, please, that you approve. Diolch yn fawr. So we're drawing to a close. So it's now item number 16, the Standards Committee Annual Report, and over to the clerk. Gareth, bore da, croeso.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone.
There is the annual report, which, as members will see from the report itself, is to number 19 now. And the North Wales Fire, that's because the North Wales Fire and Rescue Standards Committee has always issued an annual report, even before it was a statutory duty. So in your constituent authorities, if your standards committee is only up to its first or second annual report and you're wondering on the discrepancy, that's the reason why. You will see that the Standards Committee has met twice. As always with the committee, it is reviewing or conducting a rolling review of the codes and protocols for which it is responsible. And that's the second report that I'll come on to in a moment. It goes through, it looks at those codes and protocols and makes sure that they are both pertinent and up to date, and where changes are required, it makes recommendations, as it has done in that second report. You'll see that the committee also has reviewed the findings that have been reached by both the Ombudsman and the adjudication panel, case tribunals of the adjudication panel, and you will recall, Chair, that it has written, or that I have written on its behalf to you all, outlining a number of messages and a number of findings that were made in cases just to highlight issues for members. I think the key one being the issue around driving. It was, I think, perhaps an unusual decision by the Ombudsman that just because the police hadn't investigated, they weren't going to take the case forward, but they did make recommendations about not attending remote meetings whilst driving, because of course that potentially is a criminal offence. The committee has also conducted a number of visits to fire authority and committee meetings. As members will be aware, they've attended to view those meetings. Again, found broadly positive, made a number of small recommendations, but broadly positive findings about the manner in which the fire authority conducts its meetings and the way in which members conduct themselves. And lastly, Chair, the committee continues to monitor attendance. Where attendance levels fall below 50%, I will contact members and just seek an explanation as to whether there might be any extenuating circumstances, and ill health or whatever comes to the law at some point. So we will check to see whether there are extenuating circumstances and just see whether there's anything we can do to help the member bring their attendance levels back above 50%, because as we explain within the report, attendance is very important when there are so few, or relatively few, meetings within the authority during the year. Gaps, or gaps in attendance can lead to gaps in a member's knowledge, and that can have a big impact on the authority when, as I say, we have essentially somewhere between only 7 and 8 meetings per year, depending upon which committee one serves upon. That's all I wanted to say, Chair, in relation to the annual report. It is there for receipt by the authority. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, before we move on and take the second report.
Yeah, Gareth. Councillor Marion Bateman. Good morning, Marion.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. I would just like it noted and thank Gareth for contacting me to remind me that I hadn't attended any of the standards committee meetings. I have no excuse at all. It just didn't compute with me that I was a member, and I just do apologise sincerely for not attending. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. But I do take it that you're happy to continue as a member of the committee?
Yes, absolutely. And perhaps I can make up for my absence when we meet again. Thank you.
And Chair, we realised that something was wrong because Councillor Bateman is scrupulous in sending apologies, and she hadn't sent apologies, and so that caused us to query with her whether she recognised her membership, because otherwise we would have received an apology. The appointment was, of course, made in the AGM in 2022 when lots was going on and lots was new for everybody. So yes, we've resolved that now.
I can't see any other hands being raised, so we just need to approve receiving the annual report. Can I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Gareth. If everybody shows that they approve, diolch yn fawr. So we come to the last item, Gareth, which is the rolling review of Councillors' Code of Conduct. Diolch. So, as I said, Chair, the committee reviews all codes and protocols to make sure that they remain, whether they're still required, whether they are up to date. Now, 2 years ago, Richard Penn, on behalf of Welsh Government, reviewed the whole regime, ethical regime, so the Code of Conduct and how it is enforced. As part of that review, Mr. Penn made a number of recommendations for changes to the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct itself is a statutory document, but the authority can voluntarily make changes, provided it doesn't make the code any less onerous. Mr. Penn made a number of recommendations, some of which really require legislation to implement fully. But 2 of the recommendations that he made, which the Standards Committee considered, should be adopted voluntarily because of their importance.
those two recommendations are set out in the report. The first is a relatively, or hopefully a relatively simple matter. The model code of conduct was first created in a statutory instrument in 2008, 2 years before the Equality Act 2010, and therefore it doesn't include all the protected characteristics that are listed within that subsequent piece of legislation. So the first recommendation is that you add in protected characteristics that are missing, and you will see that they have been added in to the appendix, and the maternity or pregnancy is one of those, and I think the other one that was missing from the code is sexual orientation, transgender. The second recommendation, Chair, is a more complex one. And I say it's more complex. The need for it, I think, is probably immediately apparent. The solution to it is the complexity. If I explain, the Code of Conduct requires members to report any reasonably any behaviour which they reasonably believe amounts to either criminal behaviour or a breach of the Code of Conduct on the part of others. It does not include an obligation to inform either the authority or the Ombudsman where a member has themselves been convicted of an offence. And there have been a number of examples, more so at town and community council level, so not an issue at fire authority level, but these things are just not an issue till they happen, aren't they? Where members, councillors have been convicted in an offence and the council of which they are a member has been unaware of that fact. Now, part of the challenge here and the complexity here, Chair, is that no person in England is obliged to incriminate themselves under the law. It's a long-standing and very important precept within our constitution, dating back to the era when, of course, people would be tortured until they did incriminate themselves. Now, we don't have that situation anymore, but we do still have that very important fundamental principle that nobody can be required to incriminate themselves. Now, the point about incrimination is that you can only incriminate yourself prior to a trial taking place or during a trial. Once a trial has taken place, if one is convicted of an offence, the opportunity to incriminate yourself no longer exists because you've been convicted. And therefore, what the committee thought was an appropriate remedy to this disparity was to say that if a member is convicted, then the member should inform myself as the monitoring officer and the Ombudsman's office, because there is potential that under the code of criminal conviction in one's private life, particularly if it's for violence or for dishonesty, can bring one's office into disrepute. And so, Chair, that is what is proposed to be added as paragraph 6E of the code. You will see that it says that a member, or proposed to say that a member should report any conviction imposed upon them since they signed their declaration of acceptance of office. And that means that we're not delving into a member's past, and we're not breaching the legislation around the rehabilitation of offenders, where, you know, after a time you're entitled to have old offences forgotten. And it also says that this applies only where the offence is one that isn't punishable with a fixed penalty notice. And the purpose for that is so that members don't have to report, you know, relatively minor matters to myself or to the Ombudsman. We would deal with and look at more serious offences only, and by, you know, excluding offences punishable by way of FPN, fixed penalty notice. That's how we, you know, make clear that we are not dealing with minor offences. So those are the two changes suggested, Chair. The committee did ask to see how other authorities in Wales had dealt with the recommendations made by Richard Penn, and I have to say no other authority has yet made these changes apart from Flintshire County Council. The other authorities are taking the stance that they will wait for Welsh Government to legislate. Welsh Government have accepted that they do need to legislate to change the code, but have indicated that they won't do so during this Senedd term, and that they will do so during the next Senedd term, and we have no indication as to when. So that means, Chair, that legislation won't be forthcoming until at least 2026. And on that basis, Flintshire has made one of these changes, and the committee thought that it was worthwhile making these changes as well. But I do think it's fair to point out that no other council has done so. So members in constituent or other constituent authorities will be sitting there and thinking, well, why hasn't my standards committee done this? That's the reason why, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth, for that explanation. Any comments or questions from members in relation to the report? I can't see any hands being raised. Chief, you want to come in?
I just want to reiterate that this refers to members of the Fire Authority. It's not employees of North Wales Fire and Rescue Service.
That's correct, Chair. This is the Councillor's Code of Conduct. I think, Chair, certainly the changes around the Equality Act very much in the direction to support the culture of the Fire Authority and the direction of travel. And as I say, the points about the criminal convictions one, it does seem obvious when you say, well, actually, why are you only required to report others but not yourselves? And I think that's because of those difficulties around self-incrimination.
Thank you, Gareth. Gwynfor, ydych chi eisiau dod i fewn?
Diolch yn fawr.
Yes, thank you very much. The officer has made it clear if there's a judgment against someone, there's a need to report. But what happens if someone has a caution from the police? That is often seen as an admission that the person has done something wrong. And we read in the news often of bodies taking steps against someone who receives a caution. But from what you are saying today, that is not clear in this report whether someone ought to report if they have received a caution from the police.
Cautions are normally applied, Chair, in relation to either less serious offences or circumstances where the police believe, although an offence has been committed, that it's less serious, or it isn't a grave example of the offence. A criminal caution is not a conviction, so members would not be obliged to disclose criminal cautions. Certainly if the Fire Authority wanted to include that, you could. But as I say, the focus for the committee has primarily been towards the more serious end of the spectrum. And so it has in its recommendations not included cautions for that reason.
Thank you, Gareth, for that clarification. Any other questions or comments? I can't see any hands being raised, so I'm going to invite members, therefore, to accept both of the recommendations that have been presented to us by the clerk today. Is somebody happy to propose that? Thank you, Jeff. Can I have a seconder? Diolch, Gareth. Will you show that you approve the recommendations in that case? That's been approved, diolch yn fawr. And can I just take this opportunity also to publicly thank the members of the Standards Committee for their very thorough work. There is no urgent matters, so therefore we have completed the agenda for today's proceedings. Can I thank everybody for their participation and contributions. Diolch yn fawr pawb.
Diolch
Take
yn fawr,
care.
thank you.
All the best.
Fine, well.
Aye.
Well,